Here we go, everybody. Let's get into the MMA session. Here we are to talk about UFC Fight Night Shevchenko versus Carmouche 2 with your host, David and the Modern Man. Between our UFC champion and Valentina Shevchenko, who's coming in at 17-3, versus the challenger, Liz Carmouche, who's coming in at 13-6. I'd like to start this discussion off with the challenger, Liz Carmouche. For those of you who are not familiar with Liz Carmouche, let me fill you in. Liz Carmouche, along with Ronda Rousey, were the first female fighters to ever compete in the UFC octagon, in a fight that she ultimately lost in the last minute of the first round to Ronda Rousey, in which she was submitted. And since that fight, Liz has gone 5-3 in the UFC, with notable fights with Katlyn Chookagian, Miesha Tate, and Jessica Andrade, in which she dominated Jessica Andrade and finished her with elbows and punches in the second round. She also had a notable fight with Miesha Tate, in which not too much happened, just a lot of grappling exchanges, and Miesha ultimately won. But since that Ronda Rousey fight, I really haven't seen too much development in Liz Carmouche. I haven't seen much evolution in her overall game or tactics. The only thing that's really changed in her is that she's gone down a weight class to 125, which is obviously a new weight class. So she's going to be fighting people that are closer in stature to her, even though in her last fight against Lucy Pedalova, she was much shorter, though she's clearly a strong physical specimen. Just by looking at her, you can tell, which is always one of her best assets coming into a fight, considering that she's primarily a grappler. She's a black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so like any Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, she loves to grapple, but she's not primarily a wrestler. That doesn't stop her from clinching up with her opponents. She does like to do outside trips when she does engage in the clinch with them. She does like to push her opponents up against the fence and use her physical attributes against her opponents. What I do like about Liz Carmouche is that she's very patient. She never shows a sense of eagerness, worry, or hesitation in her fights. She looks like she's always thinking of what she wants to do. She's not giving her opponents opportunities in her mind because she's always moving completely out of range of them when people try to apply pressure to her because they know she just wants to grapple with them. When I say her defense is moving out of range, that is primarily her defense. She loves to go for the parry, but she tends to miss a lot, and when she does miss the parry, she just moves completely backwards, gets herself behind the double black lines. When the opponent gets in boxing range of her, she immediately tries to get a clinch. She'll either blitz into the clinch, or she'll just grab you, which she'll turn and push you up against the fence and immediately start going for takedowns. Though she's not explosive with her takedowns, she likes to methodically, slowly smush you into the canvas. She likes to get her hands together and slowly slide you or trip you down to the mat. She's not always just trying to pick you up and body slam you as though Jessica Andrade would. Some people mistakenly call her a wrestler, but she's really just a high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner who has some effective takedowns. Why I say that is you see her actually lose position, lose scrambles, and go to her back more common and way more often than you would ever see a wrestler do. That's because she is a jiu-jitsu black belt that just uses her physical attributes to almost seem like a wrestler, in which she's really not. She's just a very, very good grappler, which is nothing to be scoffed at, which is something she's really going to need in this fight, because there's no way in 20 lifetimes is she going to be better than Valentina Shevchenko when it comes to the stand-up game. I'm sorry, but I just see way too many holes and limitations in her stand-up game. The only reason why it looks like she's very good at her stand-up is because she's so defensive and she's completely moving out of range on most of her opponents, which it makes her kind of hard to hit. But I see Valentina's beautiful body kick being very open in that fight. I also see Valentina cutting her off so that Liz Carmouche can't just back herself up into the cage, in which Valentina will cut her off and effectively land punches without Carmouche being able to clinch up and get double underhooks or even shooting on a single leg on her. And if they do tend to clinch up, and if they do end up clinching up in that fight, I still give Valentina the advantage. That's because Valentina has destroyed other black belts. And what I mean is, do not forget her fight against Juliana Pena. In my opinion, Juliana Pena has showed much more MMA prowess than Liz Carmouche and her overall jiu-jitsu abilities in the octagon. And Valentina Shevchenko tapped her out as though she was a blue belt. I really don't see the advantage in this fight for Liz Carmouche. So even though it seems like the obvious pick, I'm going to still have to pick Valentina Shevchenko. She's just way too good, and the disparity in grappling skill is not anywhere close enough for it to be a real threat to Valentina Shevchenko. I see this fight going 2 rounds, with Liz Carmouche mostly just backing up in the first round, while Valentina is just trying to get the range down and get all her reads set so that she can commit to her powerful strikes in the second round. Once Liz Carmouche starts getting touched up a bit too much, she's going to commit too hard for that takedown, in which Valentina will win the grappling and or clinch exchange and end up on top. And I see her having the capabilities with ground and pound and or submission to actually beat Liz Carmouche. Liz Carmouche is active off bottom, but she doesn't have a great ability to stand back up in the fight. She's just active off the bottom, though I wouldn't call her effective. So David, in this fight, that most are just writing off as an automatic win for Valentina. Where do you see this fight going, and in what ways might it be exciting?
Well, Modern Man, I agree with that notion that Valentina's the heavily favored. This fight was only put together because Shevchenko wanted a quick turnaround, and there's no real number one contenders in this young flyweight division. Liz Carmouche was next up. She had a win over her, like you said. Valentina is a difficult opponent for any woman, and there's good reason for it. She's a high-level Muay Thai striker with a quick first step, which makes her hard to hit because when she chooses to attack, she's in and out. She's not there to get hit, unless she's countering, where you really see her high-level skills. Along with her high fight IQ, she's making reads on her opponent, looking for openings. She likes to stand at kickboxing range and will mostly wait on her opponent to make the first move and defend by either parrying or backing out, getting her opponent's timing. Being in southpaw stance, she has a nasty check hook with which she has catch some of the best women in MMA, like Amanda Nunes and Holly Holm. Another dangerous weapon she has when moving back are those kicks. Modern Man, you mentioned the body kicks, and we all remember that head kick she landed on Jessica Eye. I think the stand-up is going to be too much for Liz. I see the first round being a slower paced round where Valentina is just making those reads. Second round, I see more of a grappling clinch exchange. And in the third round, I see Valentina making the adjustments and finding her counter, finishing Liz Carmouche via knockout. On to the co-main event between Vicente Luque, the silent assassin, with a record of 16-6 and 1 draw, versus Mike Platinum Perry, who's 13-4. Let's talk about Vicente first. He's true to his nickname, the Silent Assassin, when you watch him fight. He has multiple finishes, with 9 of them coming via TKO and 6 via submission. He does a great job on the feet mixing his attacks. From the outside, he uses that long reach by throwing straights and overhands, using a lot of kicks as well, and he throws them from different angles and levels, just beating up his opponent's leg in multiple spots. He's also good in the pocket with fast hand combinations, and he really leans into his power shots, which is enough to get his head off center line to avoid getting hit cleanly. I see a lot of this fight happening in the pocket, considering Luque loves that forward pressure. He knows how to cut off his opponent, and when he gets attacked, he's sitting down and countering. However, that might not be the best plan, considering he's facing a power puncher like Mike Perry, so he's going to want to mix it up by taking to the ground, where he can use his long limbs to wrap around you. He has multiple arm triangle chokes and a couple darces on his record, and that's why I'm picking Vicente Luque. I think he has a higher fight IQ than Mike Perry, and he's going to find the submission win in the second round. Modern Man, this is a dangerous matchup for Luque, facing someone with the power of Mike Perry, especially risking his newly appointed rank. What else does Perry bring besides his power?
Aggression. What Mike Perry brings is a primal sense of aggression. His most alluring feature is his aggressive fighting nature. The fact that he comes into the octagon as though it's a street fight. The fact that he's looking at his opponents as though they're heaps of raw meat that he's ready to devour. And some say that is too simple and too basic of a mindset to have in modern MMA. Some say that those unrefined characteristics of Mike Perry are his ultimate downfall, while he'll never be ranked in the top 15, let alone in the top 5. But in his last outing, Mike Perry showed that he has patience. He showed that he does have MMA fight IQ. To take out someone like Charles Oliveira, even in a decision, is impressive. And that newfound patience is going to be critical in a fight versus Vicente Luque, because Vicente Luque is the more crisp boxer. Vicente Luque does have more volume, and from what we've seen, more cardio. But people underestimate Mike Perry's ability to find his big shot. If you've been watching and following Mike Perry's career in the UFC, his knockouts haven't all been the same. He's caught people off counter punches. He's baited people into traps. He's caught people off the break. Mike Perry is always looking for that power punch, and he knows in what positions he can find them, which will be a big key in this fight, because Vicente Luque doesn't have the best defense. He doesn't have very much head movement unless he's throwing a jab or a cross where he just slightly slips to the outside, but his head doesn't follow through and move again after that. Mike Perry will pick up on that, and he will notice that. He'll understand going into this fight that Vicente Luque is there to get hit whenever he's trying to hit Mike Perry. And unlike other fighters, Mike Perry doesn't shell up when he's thrown at. He loves when you throw at him because it gives him more reason, more opportunity, and more hunger to throw back at you. So for that, I'm actually going to pick Mike Perry in this fight. I got Mike Perry winning via second round TKO. I see Vicente Luque actually being slightly baited into Mike Perry's big shot, while consistently following Mike Perry around the cage, looking to take him down or hit him up with volume strikes. And that Mike Perry will slightly step back explode into Vicente with power punches and continue to overwhelm him in sequences similar to that until he finds the finish. And as for Vicente trying to take Mike Perry down, I say that's his best shot. His ground game is far superior to Mike Perry's ground game. But to get Mike Perry down, he's going to have to get in the clinch. And that's where I see Mike Perry actually having an advantage over Vicente Luque. Mike Perry has a very, very active clinch. This man is consistently going for the underhook. He's consistently looking to frame on his opponents and land an elbow. So Vicente will soon bail out of those clinches because he's going to be taking too much damage up close and just settle for having striking exchanges with Mike Perry. And to close out the night, we have a light heavyweight bout between Youssef Latifi, who's coming in at 14-6, and Volkan Oezdemir, who's coming in at 15-4. Let's talk Latifi. Latifi is one of the very few legitimate wrestlers that you find in Europe. He's looking to bulldoze his opponents in the first round, throw them on the ground, knock them out standing up with a flurry of hooks. Latifi in his mind is the unstoppable force, and you better be the immovable object if you're going to beat him. His biggest downfall is his cardio. For the most part, he has a small gas tank, and it's really just because he's very explosive in all his movements. Being a 205-pound man while being 5'8", you can imagine that he has a lot of muscle on the shorter frame for someone fighting at light heavyweight. So in this fight against Volkan, Latifi already knows what his avenue is for victory. He needs to take Volkan down and ground and pound him to oblivion, because that's been Volkan's biggest hole in his game ever since he's been in the UFC. But in the fights that he hasn't been able to physically manhandle his opponents and just completely enforce his will in the first opening minutes of the fight, then he gradually starts to fade away in the fight, starts to back himself up behind the double black lines, hoping that he can bait you into one of his own flurries of hooks, or hoping he can bait you into overcommitting on one of your punches so he can level change and get an easy takedown. So he really doesn't have that much to pull out of the bag after the first few couple minutes of the fight, which is going to be a problem in this fight against Volkan. I believe Volkan is going to be better than ever, in which he didn't look that bad in his last fight. I think he's going to be able to get back up after Latifi takes him down, take shots from Latifi, which are going to be very important, and end up beating Latifi in a decision 2-1, losing the first round and winning the second and third. David, in this matchup between European quote-unquote light heavyweight contenders, how do you see this fight going? Do you see Volkan really getting exposed again with the biggest hole in his game?
Last time we saw Oezdemir, we saw him make adjustments and changes to his game, learning from his 2 losses in 2018 versus Daniel Cormier and Anthony Smith. Against Dominic Reyes, he lost a close split decision, and in my opinion, he landed the cleaner shots in that fight and should have gotten the decision. In that fight, he showed that he can come out more patient and not overexert himself looking for the knockout in the first round, which would lead him to fade in the later rounds. When he does that, he gives himself more opportunities to land his power shots over the 3 rounds of the fight. He likes to drop his weight on his lead leg before attacking, allowing him to explode with his left hook or throw a stiff jab, just breaking that distance, where he can then follow up with an overhand right or a hook, which also gives him the chance to engage in the clinch, and he's strong in the clinch. We've seen him hold down Jimmy Manuwa and land the hook uppercut combo 3 consecutive times. He also momentarily held DC in the clinch and landed a couple shots. What makes his clinch so effective is he'll use his dominant hand to get the clinch, controlling the head while also putting his body into his punches with his left. I see this fight also going to a decision. Volkan's going to be the one who's applying the pressure, closing the distance and engaging in the clinch where he land devastating blows. And he's been working on his ground game, so don't be surprised if he goes for takedowns to secure those later rounds. I see that coming to fruition for Volkan, bouncing back with the decision win. Well, this card isn't the deepest card, but there's still some fighters you can enjoy watching, so I hope everybody enjoys the fights.
Now these are our predictions. We ain't dissing or dismissing. Now that the gauntlet's been thrown down, let's see who's winning.